Hello and welcome to another edition of Bible Time. This is in connection with the daily Bible reading of Believers Fellowship. And I'm glad that you've joined us again today. And we're going through the book of Judges right now. Today we're going to look at Judges chapter 3. Judges is a very interesting book. In some ways, it's a very disturbing book. It can be difficult to understand or to see what's the sense of it, what's the point of it. But I'm glad you've joined because we're going to help you think this through. And we start with this point that all scripture is inspired by God and is profitable. Book of Judges is here by the inspiration of God, and it's profitable to us. And we must understand the book in its context. We must learn to study the book as it was written, why it was written, who it was written to, what it's all about. We have to understand it in its context. And we don't understand the Old Testament in light of the New Testament. No, it's the other way around. You have to understand the Old Testament if you're really going to understand the New Testament. And so it's important that we look at this book and see what was the point of it being written and what was its intention for its real original readers. And one of the things that you're going to get to near the end of the book is that the point being made is that there was no king in Israel. Now, we believe this book was written by Samuel the prophet, maybe Samuel the last judge, if you want to look at him that way. And he is going to anoint David as the king of Israel. There was no king. We need a king. David's the king. And eventually that leads to King Jesus. And so that's why this book is so significant. And if you look at the times in which this book was written, it really has a lot of connections to us. But we want to understand the principles, draw out the principles that then were true then and are true now. That's the point of Bible study. And here's a practical principle right off the bat at the start of chapter 3. Take a look at it there. It says in verse 1, now these are the nations that the Lord left to test Israel by them. That is, all in Israel who had not experienced all the wars in Canaan. It was only in order that the generations of the people of Israel might know war, to teach war to those who had not known it before. And then it lists the nations that were left there, and they were for the testing of Israel. And here it is, to know whether Israel would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. So here's the point. The people were supposed to go in and drive out all the nations. They didn't do that. And so God said, okay, these nations are going to stay. They're going to remain there, and they're going to be like thorns in your side. But now God says, not only that, but they're going to serve as a test. These circumstances, they aren't going away. Will you obey me? That's the test. That's the test. See, now there's a real principle that you and I can live, that we can live out. We may be dealing with the consequences of some of our compromises. Some of our compromises may have created circumstances in our life. Not pleasant circumstances, difficult circumstances, challenging circumstances. They could be financial consequences. They could be health consequences. They could be relationship consequences, like maybe in your marriage. The question is, here you are, you're in this circumstance, and perhaps it's there as a consequence of some compromise in your life, or maybe it's just this is the circumstance of your life, maybe due to no fault of yours, but this is the circumstance. It's not going to change. Here's the test. Are you going to obey God? Or are you going to make excuses? Are you going to say, yeah, I can't really obey God because, and then you're going to list your circumstances? Or are you going to say, yeah, these are my circumstances, and yeah, I don't expect that they're going to change, but no matter what, I am going to obey God. That's what he's getting at. There's the principle. There's something that are you going to trust God? Or are you going to see that God transcends your circumstances, that God's help is more than enough for these circumstances? Are you going to obey him? Are you going to obey him? Well, the story in Judges is Israel failed. They didn't do that. So God turns them over to other nations who come in and plunder them, and then he in his grace, after time, brings in judges. He raises up a judge like a Gideon, like a Samson, and they are deliverers. But it's not about the judges. It's all about what God is doing. That's the key to understanding the book. And in chapter 3, we are introduced to the first 3 of the judges, Othniel, Ehud, and Shamgar. Othniel, we know, he's the son-in-law of Caleb. We were introduced to him in the book of Joshua. He brings about a great victory. Shamgar, somebody we know nothing about, but he brings about a great victory with an ox goad, which goes to show, Shamgar was just a guy with an ox goad, but he was apparently available, and God was able to use him in a great way. And it says that the Spirit came upon Othniel. God used him in a great way. But I want to focus in on this guy, Ehud. I want us to look at what Ehud did. And it's kind of an interesting story. Moab has come in and is kind of dominating Israel at the time. It's interesting. Moab, they're descendants from Lot. And so they are related to Israel. And God had not let them people of Israel take any of Moab's land, but now Moab has come in to dominate Israel. And it's kind of a comical story. They got this super fat king named Eglon, and you can read about what's happening to him. And the other thing that's brought out is that Ehud is a left-handed Benjamite. Left-handed Benjamite, which is ironic because Benjamin means the son of my right hand. Well, you got a left-handed Benjamite, and he's the judge that God raises up. And the key is that he must have been somebody, because he took the taxes to King Eglon, and he delivered the taxes. And then he starts to leave, and he goes by Gilgal. Do you remember Gilgal? Do you remember what was at Gilgal? Well, now there's idols at Gilgal. But when Joshua led the people through the Jordan River, they took out 12 stones and they piled them up in Gilgal as a memory. And perhaps as Ehud is running by there or walking by there, he sees those stones of memorial, and he sees what's happening there now with the idols, and he gets stirred up in his spirit. And he goes back and he kills King Eglon, and that leads to a great victory of Israel over the people of Moab. You can read all about it here in chapter 3. But so there's some important principles here. The principle that we see from Ehud is have a zeal for God's honor. That's what motivated him to do what he did and led to the great victory. So we should obey God no matter what the circumstances are. They are a test for us. Will we trust God? Will we obey God regardless of our circumstances? And will we be zealous for his honor, zealous enough to act in the appropriate way? Will we act courageously for the Lord's honor? Those are some important lessons, practical lessons that we take by just understanding the passage and understanding it in its context, drawing out the principle, and then making the application to our life. And we didn't need to go to the New Testament at all to do that. That's how we do Bible study. That's how we do it here at Bible Time. And we'll be seeing you more next week on Bible Time.